Good in the day, people. Shadow Eater, one angry pagan. So today, it's a bit late, I know, but it's not been exactly all that well the past couple of days. We're gonna have a look at question time from last week. When does it say that was? That is apparently from 2nd of May, which would be the 24th of Ēosturmōnaþ, Easter month. I've heard a whole bunch of stuff about this. I don't know what's true and what's not. So we're gonna have a look at it. Well, I'm gonna have a look at it. You guys are gonna have a listen because Again, if anyone's got like any recommendations for a good bit of software for me to make it so that you guys can see what I'm doing, see what I'm watching, that'd be great because the ones I've tried out in the past are fucking shit.
The polls have just closed in the local elections. So many issues for voters to consider. The cost of living, knife crime, perhaps, as we saw so horrifically on the streets of London this week.
It wasn't knife crime, you retard. That was a sword. And that wasn't knife crime. That was fucking some Christian nutcase going like, oh, get out of my country, you Muslims. Fucking twat.
Politicians have any of the answers? Tonight, we're in the very new town of Northstowe, just north of Cambridge. This university city is an academic and economic powerhouse, contributing more to the UK economy than the Premier League. Now, I don't know what football teams our audience here support, but as always, they are a broad reflection of the electoral picture across the country. Welcome to Question Time.
Now, who's on this then? We've got, oh, God. So, we've got Treasury Minister Bim Afalami. Fucking hate this twat. Peter Kyle for Labour. I think I've seen him before. I have a funny feeling he's been a little bit cringe in the past, but not entirely familiar with him. SNP Party's Kirsty Blackman. I've heard the name. Not familiar with her, I don't think. Nobel Prize winning economic professor Joseph Stiglitz. And I've never heard of that person. And the former ministerial advisor Anita Boateng. Great. This is going to be a whole bunch of fun, isn't it?
On our panel tonight, as always, a wide range of views from the government. Bim Afalami, a minister in the Treasury, and he's been in the job for just under 6 months. He was a lawyer and a banking executive before becoming...
I listened to this... this is someone I do know because I've listened to this twat on LBC and BBC Politics Live and stuff as well. Like, he's so fucked. Like, he's so... like, he comes off as so naive.
The MP for Hitchin and Harpenden in 2017. Labour's Peter Kyle is Shadow Science and Technology Secretary and MP for Hove since 2015.
Science and Technology Minister. I might have to have a look. If he's the Shadow Secretary of State for Science and Technology, I'm going to want to fucking have a look at some of the stuff he said. Because there's a lot of stuff that we could make progress if we utilise the brains of this country. There is still brains left in this country. The Tories just refuse to use them because they don't like experts. And most of the people with brains don't tend to agree with Tories.
Before that, he founded an orphanage in Romania as an aid worker and had jobs in the charity and voluntary sector. Kirsty Blackman is an SNP frontbencher.
Okay, yeah, I've seen her face before, I think.
He was deputy leader of the party at Westminster until 2022. She's devoted nearly all of her working life to Scottish independence, having been a councillor for 8 years before becoming MP for Aberdeen North, also in 2015.
Again, if you're not familiar with my position on Scottish independence, like, whilst I might be on the side of Scotland, England, Wales and that staying together, I have no issues with the Scots having another independence referendum if they want one. Like, that's... I don't see why so many people are, oh no, we can't have another one. But like, even within my own party, I'll argue with people from the Labour Party over this.
Professor Joseph Stiglitz is an economist at New York's Columbia University and has a long, long list of achievements. He was an advisor to President Bill Clinton and chief economist of the World Bank before he won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2001.
So you're likely to be a liberal economist?
Then he's
or a
advised
neocon, even.
both the SNP and then Labour under Jeremy Corbyn. His latest book is the...
Wait a minute, what was that?
World Bank, before he won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2001. Since then, he's advised both the SNP and then Labour under Jeremy...
Okay, maybe not liberal or neocon. I don't know anything about this.
His latest book is The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society. And Anita Boateng is a communications consultant and former...
Communications consultant. She's fucking horrible.
Conservative special advisor. She worked in the Departments of Justice and worked in pensions, among others, and was a councillor in the London Borough of Redbridge till 2022. Good evening. Welcome to our panellists. Welcome to our audience here in Northstowe. Great to see you. Welcome to you at home. You can catch up with the programme in all sorts of ways on iPlayer, on BBC Sounds. There's always a debate going on.
Let me know if this is loud enough, guys, when you're listening.
On social media as
well. Let me know
well.
in the comments.
Well, and I just want to say that last week we got through 3 questions. My mission tonight is to get through more. So I'm going to ask you all, fascinating though your answers will be, of course, to be reasonably brief. So I want to get the audience in as much as possible. So to that end, let's have our first question, which is from Russell Schofield.
What steps should be taken over the course of the next Parliament to alleviate the cost of living crisis?
Right, well, it's not every week we have a Nobel Prize winning economist on the programme. So, Joseph, I'm going to come to you first. What...
Okay, this will be interesting.
...steps to alleviate the cost of living crisis?
A great question. And the way to begin answering is to think a little bit about the source of that inflation. It goes back to the pandemic, the supply side interruption, and the Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the rise of food prices.
Are you going to mention like the 10 years before that?
Prices, oil, energy prices. And there's an element of what is sometimes called greedflation, that there were many firms who took advantage of the supply side interruptions and the limitation of competition that was associated with that to raise their prices. Markups went way up all over the world. It's important to understand that prices
what's talking about? Do we need price controls? What?
Are not going to go down.
State-enforced price controls?
The rate of inflation has already gone down, not because of the central bank. Let's make sure that we learn that lesson. Central banks are celebrating a victory, but it's not because of them. It was because the market responded to the interruptions, the demand shifts, the supply shortages, and they have over time become alleviated, not totally eliminated, and prices have, the rate of inflation has come down. Prices are not going to go back to where they were.
Well, look, we've got representatives of 3 parties here. We've got the Conservatives, Labour and the SNP.
So he had no solutions there. He just listed off a whole bunch of things as to the reason why we're having a cost of living crisis.
And I know you're familiar with the situation politically here. What is your view about what the steps they're suggesting to alleviate the cost of living crisis?
Well, I think they made 2 big mistakes during the period that we up to now. The first is they allowed the increase of gas prices and oil prices to get passed through to consumers through the regulatory system.
This is the government you're talking about?
The government. They shouldn't have allowed that to happen, and it didn't happen.
Okay, yeah, actually, like, the state does have that power to stop, but the Tory, it is anathema to Tory ideology to do such a thing. Like, they really didn't like having to bring, was it a water company or railway or whatever, into public ownership, into state ownership.
And everywhere. Some countries manage to disconnect the two, and that's been a big source of a problem. The second thing is, I mentioned before, like greedflation, increase of markups. They should have imposed a windfall profits tax and use the revenues.
Yep. And what's the betting that from both Anita and from Bim Afalami on the panel here, that, you know, there's going to be, oh, we did put a windfall profits tax, like, and this guy's going to come back with, really, with all the little fucking concessions you put in for the, like, fuck off.
From that windfall profits tax to help the people who are really suffering from this cost inflation. The next question, which is the one that was actually asked, is what should government do now?
Well, see, all I'm thinking is, since we've got the parties here and they can respond to you, I mean, Labour's got all sorts of suggestions to what they should do. What do you think of their proposals?
I think they're moving in the right direction. I don't think they've been ambitious enough.
Okay.
But
that is a common thing said. But the fact that he's saying that what Labour's saying is moving in the right direction, nicely done.
I think they're moving in the right direction.
And the SNP?
I'm not as familiar with their position. I mean, let me make it clear what the issue is. As I said, prices are not going to come down. What we need to do is get wages up. And there are two things to get wages up: increase the bargaining power of workers, reduce the monopoly power of corporations, and secondly, increase productivity. And what's the best way to increase productivity? Right now in the UK, more public investment. NHS, people have talked about healthcare problems. You know, lack of investment in healthcare is a productivity issue. It's a social issue.
It's not just that, right? You know, in my other video, I was talking about, you know, the processes in making the sword, right? Especially one that's not cast made, you know, a bronze sword, which is cast, right? Where you pour it into a mold and then you finish it up, right? No, this thing took lots of preparation on multiple different fronts to make a sword just like that, right? When tackling the cost of living and implementing and coming up with policies to implement that will help deal with the cost of living crisis, we need to be coming at this from multiple different angles. So people talk about, as they were saying, about the NHS, you know, healthcare policies. It's not just healthcare, because if we deal with, say, housing infrastructure, as well as, you know, dealing with the inefficiencies in the NHS, and we deal with dealing with homes for a start, that partly deals with homelessness. It partly deals, you know, it's not just building more homes, by the way. It's having better housing standards. Yeah. So this across the board will increase. Just this one aspect will increase health, taking some of the pressure off of the NHS. Like the ULEZ is another part of that, and stuff like it. We need to be looking at policies in how does one branch of policy affect all of, or any, if not all of the other policies.
Health issue, but if you're waiting in line to get treated for an illness of any kind, you're not as productive as you could be if you got treated more quickly. So that's one.
I love that. It's like 3 people in like the middle of the screen here, like, and they were all like at the same time. It was properly in sync. That was funny.
But there's a whole range of investments, public investments, that need to be made, and even if it's hard within the budget,
They should still be
they
done.
should, you know.
Okay, well, listen, let's put some of these points then. Go on,
Okay.
then.
Well, there's a lot there. Let me.
Here we go.
And again, remember, everyone's going to be reasonably brief.
I will be brief, I promise. So, the first point, look.
He's just saying you haven't invested enough.
Well, let me start.
Okay, fair enough.
So, you mentioned the international context, which was very challenging for all governments. You mentioned the war in Ukraine, COVID, obviously, before that. And I think that made things very, very challenging. Inflation went up globally. Now, we've worked very hard in partnership with the Bank of England. It's not all down to the central bank.
I just want to say, like, one thing I hate the fact that the professor said, Professor Stiglitz said, right? You know, everything he was talking about, nothing he said harked to the foundations for this cost of living crisis, which isn't in the last 4 years. The foundations of this cost of living crisis are in the Tory governments that have come over the last 10 years. 10 years before that. Like, this is ridiculous. Just completely ignore everything that happened before the last 4 years. It's ridiculous.
But they have a key role to play. Interest rates.
The government's lack of funding, lack of investment funding into the public infrastructure over the 10 years before COVID and the war is one of the reasons why we got hit so hard during the last 4 years, more than the other G7 countries. It's ridiculous.
Go up and have gone up because by doing that, but of course that affects the cost of living. Now, inflation, we brought inflation down.
No, you didn't bring inflation down. Inflation came down by itself, you fuck.
11.1% to 3.4, 3.2.
I hope someone challenges like this bullshit, because the Tories did not bring down inflation. Economists were saying at the time that Sunak made this fucking shitty little promise as well, I'm going to bring down inflation, right? Economists were saying it's going to come down by itself, whether Sunak does something or not. In fact, he even slowed it down.
2%. And, you
didn't slowed down the rate.
Guys, what I said...
Hang on, what did you just say? I missed that.
We brought inflation down from 11.1% to 3.4, 3.2%. And, you
didn't do it. The market did it.
What I said...
Boom! Yes! Fucking right. Wounded, motherfucker. Got his ass handed to him. And it was exactly, pretty much exactly what I was saying.
What I started by saying was we're working in partnership with the Bank of England. It's not entirely any one actor. Let me move forward. One of the things.
How many homeowners are there here?
Look, one of the things that makes it
This guy's having fun on the panel.
harder for inflation to stay down over time is if you increase your debt burden. And we have a plan to make sure that the debt will be falling by the end of the 5-year forecast period.
It's going to be rising up until that point.
I said by the end of the forecast period, it's coming down. And then also, if you talk about the cost of living on ordinary people, making sure that ordinary people can take home more of their own money is critically important. That's why we're cutting national insurance. We cut it by a third, which is a double taxation on work. We've cut that by a third in the last 2 fiscal events, the budget and the autumn statement. Why does that matter? It's not just more money in ordinary people's pockets. That's about £900 off for an average worker. But critically, it increases the labour supply, because what we're actually doing is that means you get more hours, more people into work. And that helps.
No. This is so naive. The Tories have been after this kind of shit ever since they came into power. Has it worked? No.
As you know, the tax burden is the highest
Recycling
for
the
70
same
years,
old
but I'm
bullshit.
sure you're familiar with that. Peter.
Okay, thank you.
So what about Joseph's points? I mean, let's take advantage of the fact that Joseph is here. And what he's saying is you're not being ambitious enough in Labour.
I'm going to try and answer Russell's point and Professor Stiglitz's in one go. In direct answer to the question, just one example of how we're going to lower the cost of living for individuals is set up a nationally owned company called GB Energy that will power the green revolution. We will make sure we have green energy on tap using British technology that will drive down the cost of electricity and the charge to individuals in individual households. That's one measure.
Taking reliance off of fossil fuels and putting them into green tech. That is one aspect of how to bring down people's bills. One aspect. As again, the sword analogy, we need all the other aspects to be working to be being worked on as well as this.
That will drive down prices for people. Now,
but just come to Joseph's point. Is saying you're not being ambitious enough with investment. Obviously, Labour has reined back considerably on how much it was.
Let me now just point to the fact that you cannot have an individual policy on top of not getting the fundamentals right, because the government is not getting the fundamentals of running an economy right. So you mentioned ambition. Professor Stiglitz mentioned a whole range of other areas. With Labour, on day one, in the first 100 days, we will legislate for a new deal for working people to give the stability for people in the workplace.
Which is what Stiglitz said.
Balance the right between workers and employers.
Yeah, he's not.
We will set the target of 1.5 million new homes being built to stimulate growth into the economy. We will make
housing again. So, like Peter Kyle is talking my style here. Like he mentioned one thing, mentioned another, mentioned another, mentioned another. All of these different aspects to work together. In concert, all of these different things, all of these different policies working in conjunction with another. This is what I want to see more of. That's what I want to see more of, I should say. Like, I want to hear more of how does one policy affect other policies. That's what I want to hear more of out of Labour.
Sure that we reform planning legislation so we can get labs being built, so we can get data centres being built, so that we can get all of the investment into the infrastructure of the future being done. We're going to reform the regulatory system. We're going to create a fast track through regulation so that innovation that comes out of places like Cambridge goes straight into the economy to create wealth and jobs as soon as possible. These are the sorts of things that are going to get the fundamentals of running the economy right, to get growth into the economy. We're going to make sure that is invested into our public services, because you cannot.
Someone after that last point on regulations, someone's going to have to explain to me what he means by that. I'm pretty sure I know roughly what he means. No, I don't. That one's lost on me.
You cannot have a functioning economy where people are having money in their pocket if 8 million Britons are waiting for treatment on the NHS. All of these things are interconnected. We will get the balance of that right, the fundamentals, and then have those specific policies to make sure we tackle the cost of living crisis.
Woman here in the green dress.
So I feel the government has invested millions during the last few years in things like the PPE scandals. So in a cost of living crisis, how can the government rationalise their failures?
Sorry, I was wondering where she was going with that. Like, what? Have the Tories got shill? No. Like, this is, what a dig.
In wasting public money, and what impact does that have?
See, that's another aspect, yeah? With a Labour government not as likely, at least I hope, a Labour government that is not as likely to waste public money, that's another aspect on top that could lead anyway to alleviating the cost of living crisis by having that little bit much more money, due to not wasting money so much, to put on policies that are needed. So,
have to us as in the general public.
Okay, let me just go around a few more people first, if I may. The woman here in the front in the orange cardie.
I feel very frustrated at the panel not mentioning the B word, because there's no doubt that Brexit has had a profound...
Yep, Brexit. Massive effect. I've said before on this channel, I'm annoyed that Labour are too scared to mention Brexit. I get why, but I really wish we could deal with it.
Effect on the economy. And I read something yesterday about an extra layer of paperwork at ports.
You think the new checks have been introduced for goods coming from the EU into the UK?
Which is going to push prices up. That's if indeed sellers in Europe want to even jump over those hurdles to get products into our country. So, you know, I'm interested to know why you didn't mention Brexit.
Okay, well, I'm going to come back to it. Yeah, let me just get a few people. Yes, there's a man right at the back in the middle. Yeah.
Okay, that could be construed as her not wanting to talk, like anyone to talk about Brexit, but she was trying to get questions from around the audience before she asked that person. She already said that, so yeah,
I think we're missing a trick here. I think what we need to do is work more hours as a country. So, for instance, before the pandemic,
we need to work more hours as a country. Do we?
And now the population's gone up about 1.5%, but the number of hours working per week has stayed pretty much the same. So we need to work more hours. And I'm actually putting the blame on people retiring early. And I think that's a trick we can cash in on. I think we hand tax incentives over to people to encourage them to boost their pension schemes, and therefore they want to retire early to claim it. Let's stop that. Let's reduce the tax incentives for pension schemes. Let's encourage people with PR and tax measures to carry on working.
And would you like to raise the pension age?
Absolutely.
To
keep going. I'm 67. I really don't want to retire. Right. I want it at least 70, 75. Yeah.
77.
70 or 75. Okay, this guy, no. There are a lot of people going to be going, you can fuck right off.
Okay.
That's free labour. It's free labour.
Free labour. Oh my God. Like, the crowd around, the audience around him are going, oh. Like, I can hear that. I don't know if you guys could hear that, but oh my fucking God. This guy is a ghoul.
That's created a big stir.
There are people laughing at him as well. Like, a lot of people that are around him looking really uncomfortable.
Amongst the audience. Anyway,
we have doctor friends who are retiring early. We know a top brain surgeon. He's retiring already. He's younger than me. Why? And my teacher friends from university, they're retiring early. Why?
Okay, Kirsty, what steps should be taken to alleviate the?
Hold on a minute. Just again, if anyone's got any problems with what I'm about to say, put it in the comments. Just hold on a second, right? If old people get to an age earlier, say like 60, 65, right, as it currently around is, right, and they don't want to work anymore, that gives more space for new, younger workers, right? Yeah? I am correct on this. I'm pretty sure. So it's on the businesses and the government to incentivize workers into working, not with the stick, with the carrot. Someone will have to. I need to have a conversation with someone about this, I think. Because I'm pretty sure that raising the pension age actually does the opposite and will lessen the amount of job spaces. I'm almost sure of that. Like, you increase the pension age, you keep old people working even longer. That's going to mean less jobs going around, isn't it? Surely. Again, if people have got problems with the way that I've worked that out, comments.
Cost of living crisis.
Russell, this is the most important question. This is what people are talking to me about on a regular basis. I have not seen in my time in politics a situation where there is less hope than there currently is. We're seeing it actually people who have always managed, have always been in that kind of just about managing category that the Tories speak about, who are genuinely struggling now. They're struggling to make ends meet. They're struggling to make their mortgage payments. They're struggling to do any of the extra things that they previously would have been able to afford to do. And actually, if you're even lower down the pile, if you're struggling on an incredibly low wage or not working at all, it's even more difficult. And if you look at inflation, if you look at some of the prices like the price of potatoes, the price of pasta, the price of the stuff that you have to buy, you can't get away from buying some of those most basic necessities. Those prices have gone through the roof. So I do agree with what's been said around trying to make wages higher. So what we've done in Scotland is we've got the people who are carers, for example, in Scotland are paid the real living wage. Not the government's pretendy living wage, but the real living wage. And we're trying to ensure that we're investing in that. We've argued with the government about the energy price caps and the payments for people around energy prices, because energy prices are too high and you can't not pay for energy prices. You cannot buy a house. If you don't have a house right now, you cannot buy one. But once you've got somewhere to live, you have to have energy in order for that house to be powered. And you have to buy food. So making those basic choices, right? Everybody. We live in, it's 2024. How are we in a situation where people cannot afford those most basic necessities?
Yeah, the reason is because of greedy ideologies. Seriously. People have the mindset that if they're of the I'm alright Jack, fuck everyone else. And evidently, across the country, people are going, that's not a mindset I want this country to have any longer. So the people with that mindset were always a minority, but they become even smaller a minority now. I hope.
So absolutely those things are a priority. People do own their houses, looking at having reductions in the mortgage rate VAT, for example. Some of those decisions are not being made properly, particularly when the Tories crashed the economy and sent mortgage rates.
The SNP has cut the budget for the affordable housing scheme, of course, it's worth putting out.
What's happened in terms of the affordable housing scheme is in terms of housing, Scotland has built 40% more houses than England per head of population. It's built 70% more houses than Wales per head of population. Do you know we have...
Scotland is more devolved than Wales, just saying.
Built 7,500 council houses in the last 4 years.
But you have reduced the budget.
No, another 80 million.
Am I wrong about that?
Another £80 million was announced this week in terms of housing, for affordable housing.
Are you saying that the housing budget has not been reduced this year compared to last year?
But what is absolutely the case is that the Scottish Government doesn't have the borrowing powers that the UK Parliament has.
All right.
We've got to work within the capital budgets that are given to us by the UK government, and the UK government has slashed our capital budget, so we cannot do as much public sector capital spend as we want.
I promise I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm going to try and be really disciplined about not having answers that are too long, so forgive me, Kirsty. Anita.
I think that was a yes from Kirsty, but I couldn't quite tell. To answer the question, Russell, I think it's great that you raised this question. I think it's a really important one. And inflation and the pain that inflation brings and how asymmetric inflation can be, because people on the very lowest incomes dealing with things like food inflation, it can be absolutely brutal. I feel a little more optimistic.
This is a government advisor from 2016 to 2019. Life wasn't great during that period. Why should anyone listen to anything this idiot's got to say unless it's to fucking deride her for the fucking bullshit that comes out of her mouth? And when she doesn't come out with bullshit, it's to try and frame her bullshit in, that old saying of like, if you put the truths in there, the lies come across a bit easier.
Than the rest of the panel about the fact that inflation seems to be moving in the right direction, and we could see, for instance, interest rate cuts like towards the end of the year that will make a material difference to people's lives. The actual answers around this are that we obviously have to keep inflation under control, but we have to go for growth. And the reality of encouraging
business... Oh my God, that is literally a trust line. She's pulling a line from the failed Prime Minister Liz Truss. Crying out loud.
Business investment in particular, we're seeing quite a lot of business investment in Cambridge, for instance, is that is the way to drive productivity and really get our economy moving. Now, the government's done some really interesting things around capital expensing, which basically encourages businesses and corporations to spend a lot more money in investing in its people. And that's going to take a while to see through, and it's got to stay consistent. But I think
from what I've been hearing on this front, like, there are a lot of economists going, that's not how it's going to work.
Answers here lie in growth. And because ultimately, and Joseph alluded to this, the reality is that we live in a global system where global supply shocks like a war or like energy prices, supply chain shocks, something like an unprecedented pandemic may happen. What we've got to do is have the gears in our economy that mean people are paid enough
I'm sorry, but like, again, everyone here is ignoring the fact that the standard of living for people was already plummeting before the last 4 years came into being. Like, this is ridiculous. All the last 4 years has done is made what was a bad situation worse.
Weather that storm.
Joseph, can I come back to you and just ask, what you think of what you've heard? And also, there are a couple of points made there. You mentioned Brexit and the effect on the economy, and you were talking about government wasting money on things like PPE, which hasn't been used, that kind of thing. So what do you think of what you've heard?
So the most important aspect of this is, yes, we need more investment. And part of the issue here and the differences is what kind of investment. One part of the investment, I think everybody should agree on, is investment in the public health system. NHS is really a jewel that UK has. I wish we had. Electricity, renewable electricity, can bring the prices down if it's done in the right way. And I think what Peter says is right. That
boom, motherfucker, fuck off, Ben.
Something along those lines is the kind of investment.
I like that.
More broadly, though, you are in a global landscape, you're in a global competition, and right now you're losing. Cambridge is a real source of innovation. I spent several years at...
Look, universities all over this country could be a properly good source for innovation, but the Tories don't like to use them because they know the students aren't for them.
At Cambridge,
they don't like experts. All the Tories, most of these Tory ideas that the Tories have had over the last 14 years haven't fucking worked. And most people who study this shit know this stuff. And the Tories know that they know their stuff. So that's why they went on that bullshit of fucking, like, what do the experts know? Fucking more than you do, you prick.
Place and a great source of innovation, but it needs more support. And if you ask, what is the strength of the United States? Is it the private sector? No, the real strength of and I mean, it's partly the private sector, but what has created the big tech giants that are so good at tax avoidance is that our technology, our great universities, none of which are for profit, they're all private, are endowments or foundations or state universities like University of California, Berkeley. They've created in Silicon Valley and elsewhere a kind of bubble that we've been able to channel. And I think that's the kind of investment that you need. We're spending...
It's not new. This idea isn't new. Going to the intellectuals of this country and going, do you know of a way that, are the intellectuals in the terms of science and technology, yeah? Do you guys know, engineers as well, right? Do you guys know of a way that we can fix this? If there is a viable way we can fix this that's not going to absolutely break our fucking budget, then I will put the back. Then we the government will put the back in it, right? This isn't unknown in history, not even in British history. But like the Tories, they just want to keep they want to put everything to the market. They want everything to be private. the state shouldn't have a hand in any of this. Like, I wouldn't expect us to be able to copy what America does, but, like, again, this isn't anathema to us. Some of the best stuff, technology-wise, was found out about in this fucking country. Science and tech could be a thing for us, as it once was. And I'm not talking from a nostalgic point of view here. This is from a realistic point of view. There are many brains in this country that know what they're talking about and know what that have been saying what we need to be doing for ages. The government doesn't want to listen. We need to kind of move away from this. We need to be more practical when it comes to this stuff. We need to be going to the universities. We need to be going to, these places of research, building up, or from the ground up. New places of research into different fields and stuff. We're an island. Why is there no fucking there's the marine reserves and stuff, but surely there are areas of the UK where this tidal energy research could actually be researched. We need to figure out this stuff, and we have the brains in this country to do so. It's not all left our shores. In fact, most of them can't leave our fucking shores. And you just got enough money to stay in university as it is. Just saying. Like, the anti-intellectualism has been very fascist over the past
over
14
$1
years.
trillion in green investments, in support for green investment. That's a lot of money, even
for the United States.
Even for the United States. You're being left behind. And that's why the kind of innovation policies that Peter represents, but they're not ambitious enough, are the way to go.
Okay. Right, I'm going to take another question.
Okay, but the US economy compared to the UK economy had a much stronger foundation to then go, yeah, we can chuck this amount of money in. Like, the Tories have broken the foundations for our economy. Like, I know we need big things to be happening in this country. But do people just... Is it impossible for people to see the fact that the Tories have broken the foundations? We need to reset foundations, good, strong foundations, so we can do this big stuff. That's how low we've gotten to in this country. We've got courtrooms that are collapsing. We've got hospitals that are collapsing. We've got schools that are fucking collapsing. We've got houses that are collapsing. We've got houses that are more susceptible than ever to damp, mould, and even fucking being set off in flames. Let alone all the other fucking issues that this country is having right now. I really wish people could think about the long game here. Really do. I know in the short term things are needed, but these plans for the long term, like, in many ways will have effects in the short to mid term as well.
But before I do, I just want to tell you where we are going to be next week. We are in Stoke. And the week after that, we're in Scotland. We're in Aberdeen, actually, Kirsty. Which should be interesting. Yes. It's where my dad was born. Aberdeen. Anyway, there we go. And all our those two locations are on the website. If you'd like to come and be part of the audience, in fact, all our locations until July, I think, are on the website. So have a look, and if you'd like to come and be part of the audience, you can.
I tried to be part of the audience for BBC Question Time when it came down to painting. Did I get to go? No.
Follow the instructions there on the website. Right, let's take another question now from Angela. Angela, there you are.
In view of Humza Yousaf's resignation as First Minister for Scotland, does the panel think that the Scottish National Party is now a spent force?
Well, Kirsty, obviously, I'm going to ask.
Oh, that's a... Yeah, no. But they have been in power for a long time. And it is possible that you know, a lot of people are thinking that they are tired out as a party. Now, I have spoken to Scottish people who aren't fans of the SNP and are not Tories either.
Ask you. So Humza Yousaf has resigned. We're about to have almost certainly a new First Minister in the form of John Swinney, who's had some very warm words to say about Kate Forbes. Kirsty, is this SNP now spent force?
No, I mean, I think we're phenomenally successful. I think we've done amazing.
That's just it, right? The SNP have done a lot. They could do more if they thought less about independence. But they could also do more with more devolution.
Amazing things in government. I'm massively proud of all of the things that we've done in government. And what John Swinney's talking about is getting back to those kind of bread and butter issues, getting back to the things that matter to the people of Scotland and making sure that we're doing more of those. So what we're already doing is
was that a tacit admission that independence isn't a bread and butter issue for the Scottish people? I've spoken to quite a few people who seem to think it is. Any of my Scots viewers, do you want to explain this for me? I'm not trying to take the piss here. Like, do you want to explain what she's saying here? That almost comes across as a tacit admission that independence isn't a bread and butter issue. Because she's saying that the SNP need to get back to bread and butter issues. So what is she referencing there, please? See, no grin. I genuinely want to know what, like, my Scots viewers, what's the explanation here, please?
Mitigating the issues that have been brought about by the changes in the welfare system, for example, by the cost of living crisis. We're focusing on, reducing child poverty as much as we possibly can. We've got
this, like, a lot of what SNP have done and what she's saying here are the reasons why I find myself an ally, a left ally of the SNP. Now, my issue is people like fucking Kate Forbes, from Christian mentalists.
The best at A&E in the United Kingdom. We have got the highest number.
Still falling far short of lots of the targets. So.
There are absolutely.
I mean, you're less worse, I suppose. That's what
we could make in our NHS, but our NHS, we've got the best A&E in the whole of the UK. We're doing brilliantly compared to the rest of the UK.
I'll say brilliantly
compared to the rest of the UK, which just goes to show the fact that again, she made a good point earlier, right? In that the Scots have, like, in large part, the Scots have to rely on government funding for the big project stuff. So, with more devolution, with more decision power given to the Scottish and Welsh and Northern Irish governments and the regional councils. Again, like, this goes back to what Starmer and Brown were on about, with more devolution everywhere in the UK. I'm not entirely sure about a federalised system like Phil from a different bias was on about, but I can see why he's thinking that way.
So one way of describing it is that and improvements that we need to make. That is the case, but we're doing better. We're doing brilliantly in terms of school leavers going to positive destinations. So 95% of kids leaving school are going on to a positive destination. That's wonderful. We've got massive increases in the number of children from deprived areas going to university. We've got free prescriptions, we've got free university tuition, we've got free eye tests, we've got free dental checkups.
So if it's all so marvellous,
No, that's not the point. The point, it is better than the rest of the UK. That's the whole. That's the origin point here.
Why has there been such disunity in the SNP? As we've seen, there's been obviously quite a lot of fallout this week. And let me just ask you about John Swinney, because he's obviously now going to be the new leader. You say he's going to take us back to
John
breadlock
Swinney's
issues.
going to be the new leader.
I mean, you.
Oh, thank fuck. Like, I'd rather him, okay, over fucking Kate Forbes.
Said this week, fewer people dislike John Swinney than dislike Kate Forbes, which strikes me as not a ringing endorsement.
That is literally. That was literally me.
I was actually really clear that in the rest of that conversation that I wasn't going to endorse anyone until I saw all of the candidates.
Yes, but nonetheless, you could have said this one's great and that one's great. But you're just saying people don't really dislike them.
Specifically asked on my views between the two of them. But you know, we've got lots of really talented politicians in Scotland. We've got lots of people who are making real change and putting the people of Scotland first in the decision-making processes. And both John and,
for example, they have a PR system up there.
Kate are of that mould. Both of them are incredibly in favour of Scottish independence and will work very hard so that we can have that fairer, socially just Scotland that we want.
Peter, does the panel think the Scottish National Party is now spent force?
Well, that's for the decision for the Scottish people to decide.
That's a good answer. That's a really good answer from Peter Kyle, the Labour MP. I like that. That would have been my answer as well. If the Scottish people think that the SNP are a spent force, then yeah.
The next election. What I'll say is there's nothing inevitable about victory or defeat for a political party, and what I've learned through the ups and downs of the
the SNP, Kirsty Blackman here is agreeing with Peter Kyle. I like that.
Labour Party, and what I've seen when Keir Starmer became leader and set about fixing our party and making us fit for service as we are today, is that you need a party that has a very clear vision, strong leadership, and you can all come around together under that leadership. When you see parties that descend into factionalism, when you see parties that descend into constitutional issues at the expense of actually what will fix the challenges that everyday people face and the whole economy face, then you see a political party, particularly when it is in government, descend into the kind of chaos that you see at the moment. And I really pity people in Scotland at the moment because they are being failed by two governments. The one here in the UK, in Westminster, which has fallen into exactly the same trap of factionalism and being obsessed with constitutional issues at the expense of actually delivering the things that will make people's lives better. And in Scotland, where the SNP is doing exactly the same. From where I sit, there are so many similarities between the way the Tory party is acting and the way that the SNP is acting that I know they see themselves as being an anti-Tory party, but why do they seem to mimic every single mistake that the Tory party faces?
That's harsh. That's overly harsh. A little bit hypocritical.
Three leaders since the last set of elections, what the SNP said about the churn in the top of the Tory party, they do not accept is a fault of their own. If you can't accept faults in your own party...
Oh, okay. I wasn't on Peter Kyle's side, but he makes a fair point there, actually. Yeah, that is a good point. I'm sorry, sorry, Scots. That's a good point. Yeah, the SNP is... Yeah, okay. Ooh. I hadn't thought about that. I still think he was a bit harsh.
When you're making the same mistakes as others, there is something fundamentally wrong about them.
Labour are keeping fiscal policy.
No. Okay, now they're just spouting Tory bollocks. They're not keeping Tory fiscal rules. That's not what they have said. How many other times this has got to be said?
I'd just like to say, I think over the past 6 months, the SNP have really actually shown up the rest of the UK political parties when it comes to the current genocide in Gaza. They are the only party, and the Green Party actually, but really that have done more than anyone else to show a willing commitment to the upholding of international law and holding human rights violations to account, and the suspension of arms sales to Israel, which is a critical issue. This is a genocide. Why aren't the other political parties bothered about it? Stop brushing it under the carpet. And actually, I would have voted for Hamza Yousaf, despite being an English person, if I could have done. But obviously, he's resigned now anyway. But they've shown the rest of the parties up.
Okay. Man there in the pink shirt.
There's a fair amount of agreement there. Yeah. But Labour do support a ceasefire, and Labour also support a suspension of arms sales. Especially, and, you know, Lammy has been saying, you know, if this indeed breaks international law, we need to be ending the arms sales. He said that. He has actually fucking said that. I think it's more than just him in the Labour Party that said that as well. So,
would the panel not agree that instead of forcing another unelected First Minister onto the people of Scotland, it would be better to allow the people to decide who would lead them, rather than having it be a party political issue?
Same as the rest. Like, it's the same point for the general election for the rest of the UK, mate.
Okay, so Joseph, let me come to you. Does the panel think the Scottish National Party is now spent force in terms of what you're referring to? John Swinney is basically standing unopposed as first leader. So, yeah, it's basically effectively going to be a coronation, really. And clearly, you advised the Scottish.
Same thing happened with
the SNP.
Some years ago.
But was it 2012? I think it might have been. So is the SNP now spent force?
No. Looking at it from the outside, and let me say I'm very much of an outsider on this, and I want to pick up a couple of themes that have been talked about. You know, all parties have to have compromise, and that it is dangerous to try to solve those compromises in the wrong way. Cameron faced a problem of a split in the Conservative Party, and to address your question, he addressed that by having a Brexit vote. And he didn't think it was going to turn out the way it did, but it is an important part of the reality today, contributing. You were absolutely right. It contributed to the rise in the cost of living. So, yeah, and not only the cost of living, it's going to slow down your productivity growth. So it was a big mistake of the Conservative Party to try to solve their internal problem by this Brexit.
Yes, that is exactly why this happened. Well, one of the reasons as to exactly why Brexit happened.
Election. The broader issue that was raised by one of the questioners about how you choose your leaders is one that's obviously others looking at the UK find it so strange that you have these votes within the party and a few people vote, and relatively few, and they wind up the party leaders. So
yeah, see, I'm not sure I agree with Phil when it comes to choosing the Prime Minister. Like, he says that it should be done by the MPs, because we've chosen the MPs and they know the system better, but this is the kind of reason why I'm not sure I agree with that position. The position just, it doesn't feel right. There's something about that just doesn't feel right.
Well, I think it is, I don't want to say it's a constitutional question, but it is a question for the way...
To be fair, we don't have a written constitution. The Americans do. Many other countries do. We don't.
UK democracy works.
That's another question. Comments below. Should I do a video on whether or not Britain should have a written constitution and delve a bit deeper into that issue? Let me know. Let me know if you guys think that would be an interesting one.
For them to re-examine, for you to re-examine how your leaders are chosen.
Anita, Angela's question is, does the panel think the SNP is now spent force?
Yeah, I want to pick up on this. I kind of wish, Kirsty, that you'd given that spiel in Aberdeen, because I'd like to see the reaction.
Spiel, coming from this fucktard. Spiel. Fucking, oh God.
Action of Scottish people, given the number of ways in which, for instance, schools internationally, this SNP Scotland has plummeted down the PISA tables for maths, for all these critical education issues. You've got the issues of drug deaths per head in Europe, which are extraordinarily high. There are some serious challenges in Scotland. And actually, Humza Yousaf was dealing with the repercussions of that unpopularity as a result of 17 years of SNP leadership, where there hasn't been enough focus on those issues, and instead you have a botched bottle.
To be fair, like, 17 years is a long time. Not a fan of one party being in charge for that long.
Scheme, hate crime bill, gender recognition, which felt like huge distractions. And Humza Yousaf has, I cannot believe the level.
The gender recognition bill was supposed to be just something else that came with the Greens. Like, what the fuck?
Of catastrophic failure that he has precipitated for the SNP. He shot himself in both feet and shot the SNP too. And I don't see how they fully recover from that.
By ending the agreement with the Greens?
Well, with the arrogance to fire the Greens and then presume that they were going to keep the SNP and Humza in place. I think this is extraordinary. And Kirsty talks about the fact there's lots of talent in the SNP. So John Swinney was leader of the SNP 20 years ago. It was John Swinney, then it was Alex Salmond, then it was Nicola Sturgeon, then it was Humza for 1 year, and now it's back to Swinney again. It feels like we're going round and round in the same way.
I find it difficult to look at the screen when she's speaking and the camera's focused. She's nothing to do with this colour of her skin at all. It's, again, like that fucking blonde twat from a couple of videos ago. On that Piers Morgan debate thing, like that Israel fucking pro-Israel journalist or whoever she was. She looks fake, just like the blonde white girl. She like, oh, I just don't like her. Like every time I look at her, I'm like, ugh.
And I don't think the Scottish people are going to stand for it much longer.
Yeah.
I think that political parties have their problems from time to time.
I don't like him, but I don't have this issue with looking at Bim. She's looking at that fucking Anita Boateng. She's so shiny. Just like that fucking blonde, white, pro-Israeli twat from the other day.
The core...
You don't say!
Sorry, I missed that.
The core problem with the SNP is that they... I think that political parties have their problems from time to time.
Shit, Sherlock.
You don't say!
Now I've got context, yeah.
The core problem with the SNP is that they have been focused on obsession with independence. And that obsession has meant they have neglected every other issue. Some of the things that Kirsty was saying, oh, well, we've got free tuition or free prescriptions. They are choices made by the SNP government that they're only able to make because the UK government's budget. That's the allocation. She mentioned...
That's all they can achieve. Because of your allocation. You arrogant little cunt. They could achieve more if you gave them more, or if they had the ability to raise more money by them fucking selves. Tory idiocy. Once again, this isn't unionist idiocy. This is Tory idiocy.
Oh well, they've got wonderful results in NHS. Drug deaths, as Anita was saying, are the highest in Europe. That is a massive public sector issue. We don't have control
of drugs policy.
Well, no, but the point is...
we don't have control of the drugs policy. You do. And no response noticed.
Public health is absolutely core. And the point I'm trying to...
He could not answer her point. Drugs policy comes under Westminster government, not Holyrood. Again, Tory idiocy.
But the point I'm trying to make,
because it's reserved. It's at Westminster.
You're able to raise taxes if you want to raise revenue. You're able to do that. In fact, you've done it, but you've already done it. You could do it more if you wanted to raise more revenue. The point I'm trying to make is this.
I'm sorry. That's all? Oh, you can raise taxes. What about all the other areas? Why can't we put in for private investment, for public investment into this stuff off our own backs?
Fundamentally, if you're obsessed with a constitutional issue where you lost the referendum,
like Brexit,
that you
you lied. Like the Tories lied to the Scottish, and I'm sorry, people who tried to say that Labour lied to the Scottish. No, the Tories lied to this. Were the ones in government. They were the ones that were able to make promises. Labour didn't want to leave the EU. The Tories fucking did. This is all down to the fucking Tories.
You lost a referendum. You lost the referendum. Instead of then saying, right, we lost the referendum, let's focus on governing Scotland, they decided...
This is so disingenuous, it's unreal.
...to continue obsessing about independence, and that is why you're in the problem you're in today.
Kirsty, do you want to briefly answer that before I move on?
I mean...
Look, yes, independence is something that takes up a lot of the Scottish National Party's political mindset. Of course it does, because they believe that independence will lead to a better outcome for Scotland. They believe that having all the powers that the Westminster government does, but for their own fucking people, will fucking help. I mean, devolved powers can do that too, right up to a point where, you know, there are certain things like security and whatnot, where even as part of the EU, there are certain, you know, if Scotland does go independent, right, and then wants to join the EU, they're still going to have to give up some of that sovereignty they just gained from Westminster. So...
We don't have control of all of the things that we'd like to have control of. We don't have control of the full benefit system. We don't have control of universal credit, for example. We don't have control of things like the personal allowance and tax. We don't have control of our own. We don't have control of the personal allowance and tax.
But you could raise tax already if you wish to.
Well,
oh my fucking God! Oh, you could do this instead. Yeah, well, we need this particular part so we can deal with arrogance from the fucking Tory party. Then fuck you.
We've changed tax actually. We've got a much more progressive tax system in Scotland.
So
the majority not of the personal allowance.
Okay. There's two different things we're talking about.
The majority of taxpayers in Scotland pay less than they would if they lived in England. They pay less on personal taxes. They pay significantly less on council tax than they would if they lived in England. They pay less on water. They pay less on a significant number of things because they live in Scotland. Now, we have made those choices, and we've made those choices because of things like the cost of living crisis. We believe that people should have the ability to live on the money that they have, and we are trying to make those changes and those choices in the best interests of the people of Scotland.
Okay, Kirsty, thank you. Right, let's take another question. So I'm going to try and get 4 in this.
I suppose, like, there are a whole bunch of English people, I gather, that don't understand why the SNP don't give a fuck about the rest of the UK. Well, because they're trying to deal with just Scotland. It's a self-evident answer, but for some reason it feels like a whole bunch of my fellow Englishmen just can't get this into their heads.
So, Jill Miller. There you are.
This week, yet another child has lost his life to a stabbing attack. As a past youth worker and a mother of 3, I should like to ask what steps should be taken to stop these horrific crimes.
Well, Jill, can I ask
That's
you, as a
knife.
youth worker, a past youth worker, as you say,
Or is she on about the
I mean, we've all been
katana?
absolutely horrified by what has happened this week, and I don't think any of us on the panel need to reiterate that. Let's take that as a given. Do you have any answers to it?
Well, I think that certainly since youth work has become a thing of the past, that nobody has got their finger on the pulse of young people.
Sorry, when was it we had youth workers in oh, that was right under Labour government.
People anymore. I mean, we've particularly in a new area here where I know youth work is non-existent.
Right. Okay. Bim, what steps should be taken to stop these horrific crimes? So, as you say, we saw it only this week.
Yeah, and look, I agree. It's appalling and horrific. Two key things, I think. The first is we need to toughen up the laws on those involved with knife crime and carrying knives.
What you mean?
That's
Give them
we've done.
longer sentences.
It was a sword, not a knife. Katana is not a knife. I just like. This is a knife, okay? This is a knife. This is a sword. Just so we were on board, okay? Like, a katana is a sword, not a knife, a sword. They are two different things. This isn't me getting finicky here. This is actually important. A knife is not a sword. A sword is not a knife.
Well,
is that what you mean?
Yes, increased up.
Some knives can be the size of swords, like a messer. It's down to the construction. That is not a fucking knife because it is of sword construction, not knife construction. I really, really wish people would be more educated on this. Medieval people were more educated on this, for fuck's sake.
Longer sentences and increase enforcement. That's what we've been working to do. But also what we've got is we have to work with communities, work on grassroots level, support third sector organisations. That's what we've done. We've increased the support to do that. There's also a health element to it as well.
When I was growing up, during the 90s and the noughties, right? Mid to late 90s and the noughties, right? There were community centres. Me and my elder younger brother had youth workers when we were at school. You know, places that we go to after school. We had these action clubs, after school clubs. All of that fucked off when the Tories came into power.
Stabbing wounds in hospital, terrible a statistic that is significantly down about a quarter over the last few years. That's not down by enough, and I'm not saying now it's been we're where we need to be. We need to continue working much, much harder. But broadly, I take that balanced approach, which is tougher sentences, but also working with communities, making sure we identify these problems before they arise.
So when you say working with communities, with the National Youth Agency, for example, which is the national body for youth work in England, says that youth services have been cut by 73% since the...
My fucking point.
Conservatives came into government.
Since the Conservatives came into government as well. Not just since Brexit, or since the pandemic, or since the war. No, since the Tories came into power, 73%.
And they think their view is that there's a link between reduced funding and an increase in knife crime.
Well, those youth services that we refer to are ones that are across the board. When it's what I was talking about, specific.
But that's a big reduction.
Well, no, I accept that, but specifically working with charities that reduce knife crime in particular in urban centres where most of this...
Why are you having to work with charities and not the fucking people with community centres and stuff? Why? Because you shut down the fucking community centres. It's the same bollocks with the food banks. Oh, there are so many... Do you know what's ridiculous? What is actually disgusting is that Tories are proud that UK has loads of fucking food banks. The reason why the UK had next to no food banks when Labour was in charge is because they weren't fucking needed. All comes back down to foundations again. If you have stronger foundations, you can build from that, and people will benefit from that. If you core out everything all the way down to the foundation, you're not going to be surprised that everything's going to be unstable and people are not going to benefit from anything.
Crime tends to come. That's the increased support that we've been doing. But of course, we need to double down that support and work with those communities. But as I say, it's important we also do what we
notice the Tory denial here. And I repeat, denial. Confronted, not from the left, but by Fiona Bruce, confronted with evidence that the Tories have, slacked on funding for youth services since they came into power. And he's like, no, I didn't hear that.
We're doing in the new criminal justice bill, which is toughen up the sentences as well. So we do need both.
Is it too easy, Peter, to get hold of knives? I mean, as I'm sure all journalists have been looking at this story this week, have been, going on.
It wasn't a fucking knife. Oh my God. It was a sword, not a knife. You fucking idiot. It was a katana. A sword. Unless they're on about something else. Let me know if they're on about something else. Because I feel like I'm missing something here, or these people are stupid.
Online, seeing how easy it is to get a sword, a knife.
It wasn't a knife.
Yeah, I mean, horrifying knives. Is it just too easy to get them? And is there anything?
Do you know the reason why I say you really can't be comparing swords to knives? Because by and large, a sword is rather more expensive than a knife. Something like this cost about 20 quid, 30 quid. Something like this, 150 quid. 5 times as much. Just I'm sorry, but the comparison is ridiculous here.
What can actually do to make it harder?
It is too easy. There are new forms of knives coming on to the market and being sold that we need to tackle. Now, it's frustrating for me to hear some of this stuff from BIM because the Labour Party has offered support for government for a couple of years now to rush legislation through that would tackle some of the knives that are making its way onto the market, but it's not come forward. And when it has come forward, it's come forward so late that some of these crimes are unfolding already.
And what kind of legislation do you mean?
Well, so to outline some of the particular types of blades which are being used now and marketed, we need to outlaw them and stiffen the sentences for it. I mean, BIM said it. We're doing it right now.
I know.
But we offered to do this 2 years ago. We had 2 years of wasted time before this making it onto the statute books.
Oh, we did do that. As soon as as Peter Kyle responded to that, he's like, swords are not knives. There seems to be this weird equation, like, yes, they're both blades, but a sword is not a knife. It just isn't. In terms of accessibility, knives are really easy to get hold of. This needs to be sorted out. Swords, on the other hand, are not so easy to get hold of. You know, the tack knife thing, people coming out with fucking swords that are just knives in the shape of a sword, right? Those things are really cheap and easy to make in this country. That's why they're so easy to get about. That thing, yes, needs to be outlawed. Something like this, which a lot of work has gone into to make, same as a fucking katana, they are different things. I'm likely gonna be on the I'm gonna be quite a few people who think I don't give a fuck about the victims here, but I do. look, of course this kind of shit didn't happen, and if they're going to have to be restrictions brought in for owning swords, I kind of understand that. But sword crime and knife crime are two different things. We're not seeing people go out every day and chopping each other up with swords. We're seeing people going out there every day and stabbing each other and chopping each other up with knives. And people might go, oh, what's a machete then? It's a knife.
But to Jill's point completely, we want to use the money that we're going to get from tackling inefficiencies in the procurement system within law enforcement to extend youth work into those places where young people need support when they're first experiencing challenges in their life. So we want to put youth workers in A&E, for example. We'll hire an extra 13,000 police officers and PCHO officers so that community policing can be returned to the places where young people hang out, and they need to make sure that they have the access and the police services can link with youth workers so that you can return that.
Right? It wasn't perfect under Labour. There were still issues, but over time, they worked. Knife crime fell. I actually saw less of it, less problems as time went on. And then the Tories come in, and then literally everything just got worse. It's not an exaggeration here. The Tories fucked up the progress that Labour had made.
Support network into the communities that need it. We will also do something else, because we need to rethink the youth experience that people have in modern life. We want to create a new offence for the exploitation, child criminal exploitation. Increasingly, we see criminals who are using children as part of their criminal endeavour. We see it.
That's a good fucking point. That is a really good fucking point. Do you know what? That's actually... Labour are actually naming policy here. That's actually policing policy. I'm liking this. If people want to argue with me on this, let me know. Comments. But I think this is actually a mission of Labour policy here. On policing.
In county lines drug operations, we see it in people smuggling. We see it in all sorts of different criminal activity, because it is easier for criminals to use children than it is to use guns, because they get a lesser sentence for it. We will level that up. If you use children as part of your criminal endeavour, you will go to prison for 10 years. Okay. That's under Labour. We put it forward as an amendment. The Conservatives voted against it. These are the sorts of measures...
Owned, motherfuckers! Like, this is actually something I want to see, actually. Labour already tried to put this in an amendment to a Tory policing bill, and the Tories refused it, and now Labour are saying, you know what, fuck you guys, when we come into government, we're just going to put it in as an actual law. Again, let me know of any downsides to this, if there are any.
That will bring in stiff sentences, protect children for the modern era, and then don't get me started on social media, because we want to tackle that as well.
Can I just, I know we've got your hands up, and thank you, I'm going to try and come to you.
Seriously, like, is Peter Kyle on a bit of a policy binge on this programme?
Can I just ask, have we got any police officers in the audience? Okay. Can I ask you, I'm sure you must have a view, but I don't know if you're happy to share it. What your view is on what more could be done to try and reduce knife crime?
I think it's a society issue, because no matter if you stiffen the sentences, these kids are still going to be scared, carry knives. I see it all the time. I don't think it's a policing issue. It's definitely like a society issue.
Right.
Okay. From an officer, okay, fair enough. I still think the law is good. I think that's a good law. He didn't say anything about that law being bad, necessarily. So, but I definitely agree with him that it is definitely more of a societal problem. Okay. And Actually, this goes back to a point I keep making about. That was delayed. A point I keep making about foundations. You know, if the foundations for a society or a culture are unstable and caught out, then that's obviously not going to end up a good result for the people, is it now? Like, seriously think about that. I think it's stupid that the social structures that were built up under Labour, again, Labour weren't perfect, but the social structures that were built, that I saw being built up when I was growing up, that have been dismantled over the last 14 years, to me, it's like taking away one of the legs to a fucking table. Or chipping away the legs to a table right at the bottom, making it more and more and more unstable over time. And they're not, like, another aspect of society, you know, the Tories making, you know, starting to ignore violent crime to make it so that the crime rates are going down, so they can do even less about it. You know, the removing regulations on hiring new police officers so that people who are even less likely worthy to be police officers are becoming police officers or getting past the vetting process because of, you know, deregulation. These are foundational things, and it's ridiculous that so few people actually recognise that we need those strong foundations. You can't just go, we need to do this.
Yes, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I agree with the police officer who just said. I think it's a larger problem that requires a holistic approach where all the parties come together to put investment in all of the.
Yeah, I mean, the Tories won't listen.
The different activities, as Peter mentioned and others mentioned, to bring together the power of government. If we think this is a serious enough problem, like the pandemic, we should attack it as such.
Okay. The Tories didn't. The Tories didn't work with the Labour Party. I mean, the Labour tried to be, you know, do a national unity thing, but the Tories weren't having any of it.
There. Well, yes, you as well, and then I'll come to you further back. Yes.
I don't think that knife crime is, you can't police it away, you can't stop and search it away. I think it's a public health problem. It might not be a disease, but it's certainly the symptom of a disease, the disease being deprivation and poverty, school exclusion, all of those things. I think we need to engage with our youth a lot more, and of course funding is an issue, but certainly I don't think that stiffer sentences is the answer.
No, it's part of an answer, especially when it comes to using children. That should be treated more heavily, like, regardless. This isn't about criminalising the kids, it's criminalising the people using the kids.
Okay, the woman a little bit further back.
I'm really interested to hear.
If you've got an argument for that, I think that's being missed here. I'm pretty sure what Peter Kyle said meant going after, in the same sense as going after the people smugglers, not the fucking refugees and asylum seekers. Like, does that make sense? I'm not pulling this out of my arse. I am just pretty sure that's what he meant. And that wasn't like the only thing that's need doing.
Here that your go-to answer is tougher sentences, make sure that
it's not tougher sentences for the kids, it's tougher sentences for those people using those kids.
they are aware of what the consequences would be. But my question to you as the panel is, have you ever tried to intervene at an early stage? Have you ever tried to contact somebody to say, there's going to be a problem here? We heard about the reduction in youth workers. These were people, as so well put.
Yeah. I do want to hear, I will be bugging people who are more in tune with the Labour Party than I am, about this. I really want to be hearing about policies for community centres, more youth workers, not just police stuff.
Had their finger on the pulse and were able to identify these individuals, have support from the peer networks to feed back to the people that might be able to prevent and take more of a harm reduction, as we've alluded to in discussing it as a public health issue.
Is that something you've got personal experience of? That you're very passionate by the way you're talking about it?
I am a mother to 2 young children, and I grew up without social media pressures, and I'm petrified of how they're going to go into, secondary school, teenage years. I feel like I'm having to re-educate myself constantly to try and even keep up with all the new platforms and trends and judgments. And at the very least, when I know people have tried to make that call, our local police station has a phone outside it. You ring it, they won't help you because there's nobody there.
Right, okay.
So, yes, I appreciate that. Actually, I think we're very blessed in our country to have 999 and the NHS, but it shouldn't have to get to crisis point
It's
for help.
about prevention as far as you're concerned. Anita, what steps can be stopped? I mean, there's no easy answer, clearly, but what steps can be taken to stop these horrific crimes?
Yeah, and I just do want to add my voice to the panel that have talked about the horrific attack this week. That was in my community, and I was a councillor.
I love how, right at the beginning of this subject, Fiona Bruce said how, it was really bad. We all feel like it was absolutely horrific. I don't think any of the rest of the panel needs to reiterate that, and every single one of them so far has reiterated that. Oh. Just completely ignored what Fiona Bruce said right at the beginning.
In Redbridge until very recently, and that's where my family's from, and it's a community that I'm very scared won't be the same again, because it was a very close-knit and trusted community, and I'm absolutely
Again, is this the sword attack? That Christian psychopath? Is this? I'm gathering that this is what they're talking about.
Stated for the family that are experiencing such grave loss this week. On the question around...
the problem is, right, is you're not seeing people getting stabbed up with, a medieval broadsword. You're not seeing people getting their heads chopped off with a fucking claymore. This katana attack is rare, actually, because they want to put it as knife crime, right? But it's not knife crime, because that's how rare it is. You don't see people going out very often and stabbing people up with katana. It's not what it's for.
Knife crime and what we can do. I think that we've actually had a really illuminating conversation about the reality that there isn't a silver bullet solution to this. I think it requires a systemic approach that it involves education, community outreach, and policing to be working hand in glove to deliver a solution. And I am quite frustrated with some of what...
Gotta admit, I agree with what she's saying here, but it's like she's worked at. She sounds like this isn't actually her point of view. She's just going on what people want to hear on this one. That's what I feel anyway. I don't feel like this is an honest answer from her.
Sadiq Khan has been doing in London in particular, because that's where this incident took place, where there's been a lot of excuses over 8 years and not enough focus on this issue, which is really complicated, and where you have to put in the time and the effort and the resources and prioritise this to really see a shift. And in fact, we've gone in the wrong direction. Knife crime is up 38% since 2016. And I just don't think that's good enough for us and our children in our communities.
Kirsty.
In Glasgow, in Scotland, we did a huge amount of work on knife crime specifically, treated it as a public health emergency, treated it as a public health issue, and ensured that we put all those holistic supports in place. You know, as the police officer said there, young people are feeling disenfranchised, they're feeling lost, they're feeling unheard, and they're feeling scared. You know, actually, we need to be there intervening and providing that mental health support, providing that community support and those youth workers, for example. But also at schools, we need to have that, you know, schools are not just about sitting down and learning how to do sums. You know, schools are about learning how to be a social human and function in society. And actually, if we can provide all of those supports to young people so that they're reaching adulthood as rounded individuals that are able to be resilient and cope with their mental health, then that's a really positive thing. So we need to put all of that in place. There's an organisation in Aberdeen called Street Sport, and Street Sport pitches up and does football sessions, for example, at night. Some of these football sessions, there's 120, 150 kids go along to it. And loads of youth workers are there. They know all of the kids. If one of the kids comes in one week and they're looking a bit down, the youth workers will speak to them. They'll find out what's bothering that kid. They'll give them that support that they need, and they might just need somebody to chat to. They might just not have somebody to chat to at home. And providing that support and providing that empathy and understanding.
These kind of support structures that were there when I was growing up under Labour.
Understanding that people need can pause things before they get to the point of being so terrified that they feel that they need to carry a knife, and then a horrific incident like the one this week occurs. Jason.
So, yeah, I find all of this discussion very interesting. Looking at it as an American, knife crimes are so small compared to our gun crimes. And, you know, every day...
From here, we watch it and can hardly believe it.
I can't believe it either. And the Republican Party, it's part of their platform that everybody should have access to guns. AK-47...
Like I said, I think this might do more harm. What this guy's done, the guy with the Christian psycho with the katana, as I said in my other video, this is going to make life harder for, you know, needlessly. Like, this didn't need to happen. Like, this guy ought to be being looked at in the first place for, you know, having a weapon and being possibly violent. You know, social media laws could help deal with this. You know, keeping an eye out for early warning signs. Maybe he was posting shit on social media before this shit happened. Like, there could have been early warning signs here that could have been picked up on if there were laws in place and as infrastructure in place so the police were able to be alerted to this stuff.
47s, so that you can shoot everybody in this room in an instant. I mean, to me, it's outrageous. But some of the discussion here has been, I think, very much to the point. It is a social issue. Early attention is really important. It's a public health issue. But there was one word that I thought that was particularly salient, particularly relevant, and these are public investments, and public investments in the youth of the country.
You know, I'm starting to see why you got this Nobel Prize. Like, I kind of have to do a bit of reading on Stiglitz. Like, this guy's not a lot of what he said. I've had arguments with, to be fair.
And they're going to bring different. Don't just think about it stopping knives. Think about it as uplifting the children in a broader way, and the challenges that Mama pointed out about social media are going to make it worse unless you both regulate the social media, but provide some of those investments that all of you have been talking about. I think it's really important.
Okay.
Public
Got time for another question. So, yeah, we go, yay, I can hear in the audience. Roger Valentine, where? Oh, there you are. Yes.
Regards new housing, should developers be forced to ensure provision of infrastructure such as schools, NHS services, leisure and shopping much earlier than they appear to be at the moment?
So,
like immediate answer, yes. It's stupid not to do so.
that appears to have touched a nerve here in Northstowe. For those of you watching who you may not be aware that Northstowe is a very new town, isn't it? You've got what I think about 1,400 homes here. You don't have a single shop, I gather. Not quite sure why that is. So, Roger, you're
what? 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 What kind of idiot does that? Who've they got in charge? Fucking Boris Johnson on this? What the fuck?
Your view, presumably, is that this is not enough provision.
I think there's already. I mean, there's going to be 10,000 houses here. I think there's already over 2,500.
Right,
There's more than
okay.
4,500 population already, and there's been no. Well, there's no shops, obviously. We say there's no services like a GP, dental
So there's no
services.
GP
etc.
surgery?
There's no GP. What the fuck? Why haven't I heard of this? Why is this not being a big thing on the news? What the fuck is going on here?
At all.
No
And even
dental surgery.
in phase 2, which is the plans have been released, the community hub that is proposed has a room that might be used, but it's not actually planned as a GP service. So I live in the adjoining village, and our GPs have to provide services for all those new people.
Oh my fucking gods. Are you kidding me? There's no GP, there's no shops, they don't have barely any public service, no public service. What the fuck? I'm gonna have to do a bit of reading up on this, because this is Northstowe. I haven't heard of this. This is what? Sorry, I'm sorry. Like, that's actually blowing me away.
I haven't got any more people. The buildings aren't big enough. You can't get an appointment within 4 or 6 weeks as a standard appointment. So
Right,
you know,
okay.
that is an issue there. And obviously shops, I appreciate maybe commercial operations don't want to open a shop until there's sufficient people, but the commissioning group should be putting, and we've got schools, but the NHS should be putting services in and leisure.
So, Peter, one of Labour's big policies, as you referred to already, is to reform the planning system, to in some instances, override people's concerns if you feel that the planning needs to take place. What about infrastructure? Because here we are in exactly that kind of place, a new town. You've got Roger, and by the sounds of it, quite a few of you agreeing with him, that there just isn't the infrastructure in place. What are you going to do about that, should you be elected?
There's not an MP that hasn't experienced what you've described. I mean, I was campaigning in a by-election recently, and it was in a community that I got to know very well, which is a complete new build, and the residents there had been promised a GP surgery and even a train station. They were promised in writing, and they were all showing me the letter that was promising it about when it went through planning.
So how are you going to change that?
Well,
because I want to hear lots in the audience, so reasonably brief if you
Well, so as we said, we will have a priority because we need to have house building. But the problem is that people don't trust the promises developers make. And if you have a lack of trust in it, it's very hard to lead communities through the change that they even
But a
need to
GP
have
surgery,
themselves.
NHS surgery shops, that's not down to the developers, that's down to
No,
either
it
the
is.
council or the
These are
government.
no.
Who do you think is going to build it? That was so stupid. I'm sorry. Like, yes, that's down to the government, but the government still needs to get developers. Whatever.
something that
These are
councils
parts of
have to say, we'll accept this planning development on the basis that these things get built.
Yeah, but Fiona, we're talking about developers who have part of the agreement for being allowed to develop a community as building the facilities for it. Then they go and build the housing, but they don't build the facilities
So
for
they don't
it.
stick to the
Exactly.
deal, right.
So, so part of the deal that we'll put is, yes, we'll put a lot of power in communities' hands. We will insist that those agreements made by developers are honoured. We need to rebuild the trust in the planning system.
Okay. You will insist on it. What? Fines? Are you gonna? How are you gonna enforce that? Insisting is not quite enough.
System in order to deliver on our ambition, because unless you can actually deliver what is promised for communities, it will be impossible to take the communities through the change and the development we need to see happening. So yes, we'll be ambitious, but we will hold developers' feet to the fire on it, because the Labour Party is not...
You said you would insist, so what does that mean? Does that mean you will fine these people? You will take them to court?
Hock to the developers, as is the current Tory party.
Are you?
No, we're not. And let me, well, actually, I was about to say, I agree. Peter, I was actually about to say I agree with some of what you said, which was that trust is so critical when it comes to the question of development. I see this in my own constituency, and as of course Peter made the point that all MPs have seen this to some degree. There are two key things I think need to be brought out here. The first is that local authorities do, as you said, Fiona, do have the powers, if they wish to exercise them, to insist that developers meet their promises. And in some areas they do that well, and in other areas they do it poorly. That's the first point. And local, we have...
I think it comes down to enforcement. I'm sorry, like, national government should enforce this. If you don't go along with it, you will be fined. You will be taken to court, you will be fined.
We have local communities and vote for local councils and local councillors, and central government does other things as well. It's not right that absolutely every decision is made by central government. It's important that local people and local councils do have powers, and those come with responsibilities. That's the first point. And secondly, one thing that we've been doing over recently...
My point here is that national government should back up local government to take on these untrustworthy developers. Surely. Again, if you have any arguments with my points of view on this, comments.
And we're stepping up this effort, is to make sure that the money for infrastructure comes in earlier in the process. Because in the past, the money did come, but it came way later down the line after the communities were much bigger, when they had several thousand houses. That's work that we've been doing, but there's more to do. But also, we do have to hold local councils and local councillors to account. It's not always...
These people haven't got a fucking doctor, they haven't got fucking shops. What the fuck is going on here? These people haven't got waffle in answer to their problems. Even from Labour. I say even from Labour, but I'm a Labour member, okay? It's so disappointing. This is so disappointing.
Central government's ability in order to do that.
Man here in the glasses.
It's all great saying the money will come.
But where's the money?
But it doesn't come. I'm from another local town, Camborne, which was broken ground in 1999, so it's 20 years down the road from where Northstowe is now, and all the same kind of problems. Where, yes, we've got some facilities now because it's 20 years further on, but they still haven't built the high street that they promised over 2 decades ago. And it's ridiculous. We're making the same mistakes now.
As I said, the Labour government wasn't perfect. The last Labour government was far from perfect. There were a lot more things they did well that the Tories have not.
20 years on, and we've been through goodness knows how many different governments since then, both sides of the political spectrum. Everybody's saying all the right things, oh yes, we will change the way we do it. The only way to do this is not to necessarily hold people's feet to the fire on it. You make them do it right at the start, and you make them put those services in when they first break ground.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
you don't build houses without social infrastructure there, without the infrastructure. You need to make that a building requirement. It needs to be regulations on this.
It will never happen because we've been told now in Camborne, unless this high street, makes money, we're not going to build it. It's so much
capitalism. That this is, and people say, "Oh, why don't you like capitalism?" Let me think. Could it possibly be that capitalism incentivizes people to be fucking greedy and not to give a fuck about others and just do things if you can only get profit out of it? Maybe that could be part of it.
much more than that. We've heard all about how it's essential to the local community and to the youth to have all of these facilities there. Yeah.
I hear your point. Thank you. Yes.
As a young person, I do find it really...
I love the fact you've introduced yourself as a young person.
I find it really frustrating. I live in a village near Northstowe, and there is nothing to do here. There is nothing. We go to Cambridge, which is better, but there's nothing to do in the high streets, and there's no facilities for young people. I haven't heard anything, like the politicians here haven't said anything to me about what they're going to do specifically for young people, to give us stuff to do, because going back to the last question, this is one of the problems, and this is why we have these...
Because the youth have been ignored. Yep, this is another aspect. You see what I was talking about, where one aspect, one policy aspect directly affects another policy aspect, like...
really antisocial things
things are
happening. It's because we have nothing to do.
Okay, Anita, you have to be reasonably because we're running out of time.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And when you combine that with that's why you have more young people on social media for longer. So I think there's a really critical point here. Look, let's step back. Of course, there is so much frustration in this room because the reality is infrastructure is almost as critical as housing. And we are not going to build...
No. It is as... Tories, it is as critical. You shouldn't have one without the other, for fuck's sake. It's like this whole shit about who deserves better pay, doctors or binmen. They both deserve the same fucking pay. Because socially and culturally speaking, they do just as important jobs as each other. Both jobs rely on one another. Essentially speaking. Like, seriously. This is ridiculous.
Public consent and support for housing, which we do need, unless we can provide proper reassurance the infrastructure that is supposed to come comes. And I think your point around how you do that early enough in the process, that it's a reality and not a thing that never ever comes, I think is critical. And actually, it does also spring to mind. I think there are some really important developments in Cambridge. I also think we should be looking at brownfield urban regeneration, because new towns, Peter will talk about it, are great and ambitious and pie in the sky, but we do need to be looking at using places in centres and city centres where there is infrastructure a bit better. So I totally hear you about this issue.
Joseph.
Do you?
I think there's one lesson that comes out of this very clearly. We just can't leave it to the market. And the basic Tory position, leave it to the market, hasn't worked. And you need to have strong public investments. And I use that word.
I like that. You directly called it out as a Tory ideology of leave it to the market. I fucking love that. I'm becoming more and more of a fan of this Professor Joseph Stiglitz guy.
Our young people, UK young people, we have the same problem. And the government has an important role, not only in providing the infrastructure in these cases, making it possible for the private sector, but in many cases, the private sector doesn't step in. And as important as industrial policy is for, at the national level, competitiveness, people live at the local level. And there have to be investments in the country at the local level to enrich the lives of the people in the country.
This guy seems to be on the ball here, seriously. He seems to be coming out with a fair bit of sense.
Man, further back in there, you got a t-shirt on, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as another, well, not quite as young person,
You just make this all feel really.
I put myself in that category.
Funny enough, I agree with the Nobel Prize-winning economist that the market just constantly fails to do these things because it's really easy to kind of solve this problem. And a lot of people have been on the panel have been saying that's a really good point that the questions put forward about addressing it. It's really simple. Just make it financially unviable for contractors to not do what they say. You can tax them, you can do whatever you want to them, as long as they do what they say. And on the point of young people not having much to do, where I'm from, which is Harpenden, I also find that young people have stuff to do until they're 10, and then nothing after that.
Again, for me, when I was growing up, even down here in Torbay, which was always Tory controlled or Lib Dem controlled, right? There was still community centres, more, youth workers and such. People came into school to see if you were fucking doing all right. There isn't that level of support anymore.
Kind of a dead land for any sort of adolescence. Okay. So I was just wondering what Bim would say
You want
about
more of that? Well, let me come to Kirsty just because she hasn't spoken yet. Kirsty.
In terms of planning, I'm not entirely sure where the blockage is in the system. We've recently had a suburb built on the outskirts of Aberdeen. It's got a number of hundreds of houses rather than thousands. Once a certain number of the properties were built, they had to open the school, they had to open the shop before the rest of the properties were allowed to be built. Now, you just need a planning system that allows that to happen.
So are you saying this problem doesn't, I genuinely don't know the answer. You're saying this problem just doesn't happen in Scotland?
I absolutely don't get everything right, but there are places where we've absolutely solved that problem and ensured that phasing has happened, so those services have come in. And just on stuff for young people, people older than me, people my generation maybe say, oh yeah, youth clubs are really great, right? But the thing is, young people don't want to go to youth clubs.
It's not cool.
What we really, want to sit in a smelly community centre, when you could actually be hanging about with your pals somewhere nicer. So what we need to do is ensure that we're making youth-led decisions on this. We're speaking to young people, listening to young people, which is the key bit, and then putting those...
Okay, maybe that is the case then. I found great use out of the youth centres when I was growing up, and I didn't have the most stable childhood growing up. Youth centres were pretty key for me growing up at certain points. And okay, is that an actual problem? Is that a thing, like what she's saying here? Because again, for me, like, youth centres and community centres were actually, good. The ones I went to were actually funded properly, and the proper staff there and whatnot. A lot of these community centres were tied in with the local police as well. I don't know. Leave me some comments on this particular question.
Services in place. One of the things we've done in Scotland is put in free buses for under 22s, which makes a massive difference because particularly if you live in more rural areas, you're able to travel to see your friends that you probably go to school with or that you want to spend time with. But we really need to actually listen to young people rather than do what an awful lot of older people in my patch tend to say, which is let's have more youth clubs. Okay. Young people don't.
I suppose I'm 30 now. Okay, maybe. You guys will have to let me know on this. I'm really not sure on that one.
On that, let's do cool stuff for them instead.
Woman there in the dark top, yeah.
Hi. I understand what you're saying about youth facilities, but I'm listening to people talking about wanting shops and the high street and what have you. The truth of the matter is how are these things going to be put in when I bet a lot of people in here don't even support their own high street. It's a massive problem for small businesses because there's not enough help to keep them going. So asking for that kind of infrastructure, you've got to have someone run it, and people really struggle running small businesses because we are in a battle with the likes of Amazon and the ease of everyone's busy lives. don't get me wrong, I have to order on Amazon, even though I'm involved in a small business in a town, because you can't get everything you want. But people don't realise if you don't spend your money on your own high street, you won't get the shops in new towns, because why would anybody open one?
Right, I hear you. We've got about 20 seconds left. I'm going to try one more.
This goes back to what I said earlier about incentives.
The back in the check shirt.
Hi. I think there should be more power given to local governments. I'll give you an example. I heard that London, Sadiq Khan is only controlling about 7% of his budget for improving London, whereas cities like New York is in control of 50% of their budget, and Japan, in Tokyo, the local mayor is in control of 75% of his city's budget. So if the power is given back to local authorities, they can...
Sadiq Khan only has control of 7% of the budget. Are you kidding me? Is that real? What the fuck?
Deal with local issues, I think,
No wonder he's been so hampered.
rather than central government control.
Okay, thank you for your point. I know you're desperate to come in the Orange County, but I've run out of time. I'm sorry, I did hear from you. There's money. Okay, listen.
£177 million that Homes England is giving Anglian Water to move their fully functioning sewage works just a mile from Cowley Road to Greenbelt.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry I can't elaborate on that point any further because we're out of time. But you were desperate to make your point, and you.
Well done. Yeah, well done. She got a point in. All right. Yeah, that's the end now. Wow. Okay. So, yeah. I need to hear more from Labour about how they're going to deal with youth services and whatnot. I need to hear more about that. We need to hear more about how policies are interconnected and intraconnected. How one policy affects another. To tackle even just one or two problems, like it's. For some people this might be next level thinking, but to me it's just common sense, and it's not being done. For me, the evidence shows this is not being done. So, okay, this was all right. There, there was one ghoul in the audience who was like, "Oh, we should make old people work longer." Again, if you got arguments against me and what I said on that one, comment. I also let me know what you guys think about me doing a video about whether or not we should have constitution, and if so, what we'd put in it and how it would be formed and whatnot. Let me know if you guys think that would be an interesting video for me to go into. Again, I thank you to Political TV, by the way, for putting all this stuff out again. Whoever they are, I wouldn't be able to do this stuff. I wouldn't be able to watch this stuff because I don't have access to the TV, so I can't just watch this on the TV. So I'm gonna be putting the link to this in the description, and it will be at the end of the video. And again, this is on the Political TV. Question time. I think is more informative than people think, because I'm not hearing so many Tory shills. Okay, there was that ghoul, but I'm actually not hearing so many Tory shills in the question time audiences. The people are properly turning against the Tories here. I liked what Peter Kyle was saying earlier. I like, he seemed like, you know, the bunch of policies that were just, you know, offloaded then. But there are other areas where I'm like, come on, man, like, that's not an explanation. That's just rehashing the symptoms of the problem. So, yeah, and, you know, I'm saying about that, oh, we need to insist. Yeah, how are you going to enforce it? This is what people want to know. So, yeah, I hope you guys like this. Again, if you guys know fucking a computer you know, software where you guys can see what I'm watching, that'd be great. But let me know if the sound was okay. It should be loud enough. Hopefully, on my next payment, I'll be able to get a fucking microphone so you guys can hear me better. But yeah, this has been Shadow Eater, One Angry Pagan. Let me know what you guys think. As I said, blessed say, good weird, blessed be, and good fate to all of you. My shield at your backs, guys. Goodbye.